What's up YouTube? This is GalacticGod and I'm coming at you today with another one of my Yu-Gi-Oh! Top 5s. Now today I'm going to be looking at the top 5 worst erratas in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. Now once upon a time, way back in the day, erratas were basically used to fix translation errors when a card was mistranslated from its OCG version. But lately, Konami has been using erratas to kind of nerf overpowered cards that they personally see will never come off of the forbidden list in their current state. And these are my picks for the top 5 worst erratas done to cards. So coming in at the number 5 spot is a card that I used to love to play back in the day, Ring of Destruction. Now the original effect of the card stated to destroy one face-up monster and inflict damage equal to the destroyed monster's attack to the life points of both you and your opponent. I remember this being used to actually end quite a few games. You would just summon a really strong monster, attack your opponent, and then ring your own monster to finish them off. It's also probably what led to it being placed on the ban list in the first place. Now the current errata for the card states, during your opponent's turn, target one face-up monster your opponent controls whose attack is less than or equal to their life points. Destroy that face-up monster, and if you do, take damage to its original attack. Then inflict damage to your opponent equal to the damage that you took. You can only activate one Ring of Destruction per turn, thus rendering the previous combo pretty much useless in this newest incarnation of the card. Not to mention, if your opponent has less life points than the monster that you actually want to destroy, you're unable to do so, thus neutering a lot of the original usefulness of the card. Now coming in at the number 4 spot is Green Baboon, Defender of the Forest. Now many years ago when this card first came out, a lot of players were definitely hyped about finally getting over here in the TCG. It had an original effect that stated when a beast type monster you control is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can pay 1,000 life points to special summon this card from your hand or the graveyard. So originally, whenever your beast monster was destroyed by any means, you could use the effect to special summon this big beater. But the current effect states, if this card is in your hand and graveyard, when a face-up beast-type monster you control is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, except during the damage step, you can pay 1,000 life points and special summon this card. It's the except during the damage step that really hinders it. The way that it's worded now, whenever your monsters are destroyed during the damage step, you cannot use its effect to special summon it. You have to wait for them to use something like Regeki or Torrential Tribute or whatever, thus making this card very much more unplayable, and in turn, why we don't see it used any longer. Now coming in at the number 3 spot is Temple of the Kings. This card was deemed so powerful that it was banned before it was even released here in the TCG. Upon its announcement, it was placed on the forbidden list. And some of you guys might be asking, why is that? Well, its original effect stated that the controller of this card can activate traps the same turn that they are set. And if you control a mystical beast Scarret and this card, you can send both to the graveyard to special summon one monster from your hand, your deck, or your extra deck. Now the newly errated version definitely hinders the previous effect. It now states that you can activate one trap card the turn it was set. And you can send one mystical beast Scarret and this card that you control to the graveyard to special summon one monster from your hand deck or one fusion monster from your extra deck. And you can only use each effect of Temple of Kings once per turn. Now obviously the previous version was extremely broken. Being able to use traps the same turn you set them, you could do this with as many traps as you had in your hand. Plus being able to summon any monster from your hand deck or extra deck. It could have been Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, whatever. You could bring it out. Now you can only activate one trap that you set per turn, and if you summon a monster from the extra deck, it's gotta be a fusion monster. And even though this card does see some play every now and then in different kind of trolley decks, it is nowhere near compared to its former self. Coming in at the number 2 spot is Exchange of the Spirit. Now I remember picking this card up from a sneak peek when it was first released many years ago. It was definitely a card that I was very stoked about getting. It had an effect that stated, activate this card only when there are 15 or more cards in your graveyard. pay 1,000 life points. Both players swap the cards in their graveyard with the cards in their deck. Then, both players shuffle their decks. Now, admittedly, this card was basically used for kind of a trolley FTK. You would just send 15 of your own cards to the graveyard, play this card on your opponent's turn, you guys swap your decks with your cards, your opponent should have no cards in their graveyard, so on their following turn, when they go to draw, they can't because their deck is gone. Now the newest incarnation of this card states that if both players have 15 or more cards in their graveyard, pay 1,000 life points and each player swaps the cards in their graveyard with the cards in their deck, then shuffles the deck. You can only activate one exchange of spirit per turn. Now, obviously the biggest change to this really is that both players now have to have 15 cards. So, thus eliminating the former FTK, OTK, whatever you want to call it, that little trolley version of the deck that would destroy your opponent in basically 1 or 2 turns. Is this necessarily a bad thing? Probably not, because, most of us do hate trolley decks, but there's also just a shadow of how powerful this card once was. Now coming in at the number 1 spot is a card that was ruined by its errata. I'm talking about Sinister, Serpent. Now the original effect of this card stated, during your standby phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can return it to your hand. It was an awesome card back in the day. You could use it as discard fodder for many different effects throughout the game, whether they be a cost for cards like Magic Jammer, Vine Wrath, or even Tribe Infecting Virus. Now many duelists, myself included, actually believed that it was time for this card to come off of the ban list, at least for one format, to see if it still held the strength that it once had. But instead of returning it in its former incarnation, Konami decided to errata it first. And the now current version of the card states that during your standby phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can add it to your hand. Also, banish 1 Sinister Serpent from your graveyard during your opponent's end phase. You can only use the effect of Sinister Serpent once per turn. Now this newest version really hinders how useful Sinister Serpent once was, almost making it pointless to have it in your deck and try and return it back, giving credence to why this card has not seen any play whatsoever since it was errata. In my opinion, Sinister Serpent could have came back with its original text intact, thus making it, in my opinion, the worst errata in Yu-Gi-Oh! Alright, and there you have it, guys. Those were my picks for the top 5 worst erratas in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. Now, of course, they may differ from the ones that you would choose, so I encourage you to let me know what your top 5 would be down in the comment section below. And I guess that's it for now. This is GalacticGod.